In the merciless heart of the frontier, a lone woman discovered a wounded Apache warrior, collapsed just beyond the worn threshold of her homestead. To help him was to risk everything: her safety, her livelihood, and the fragile peace she had carved from the unforgiving land. To turn away would be to betray a conscience honed by solitude and hard choices. Little did she know, this single act would ripple through the valley like distant thunder, forever altering the fate that awaited beyond the dawn. The vast prairie stretched in every direction, a muted sea of dry grasses whispering under an unyielding sun. Jagged red cliffs rose like silent sentinels against the pale sky, their shadows casting eerie patterns over the weathered wooden fence surrounding the isolated cabin. The air was thick with the scent of dust, sagebrush, and smoke still faint from last night's fire, a solitude so complete it pressed upon the soul, leaving no room for distractions, only the raw presence of survival. She knelt beside him, her hands steady despite the tremble in her chest. The warrior's dark eyes fluttered open, revealing pain deeper than the knife wounds marring his flesh. His breathing was shallow, each gasp a test of will. She saw not an enemy, but a man bound by codes older than the land itself. A man whose courage had not deserted him. Even in brokenness, fear whispered warnings in her mind. The local militia was unforgiving. The Apache discovery could mean death. Every sound beyond the cabin walls forced her to pause. An owl's hoot, the snap of a twig, reminders of the peril threading through this quiet evening. She offered him food, simple fare of salted meat and hard bread, watching as hunger overcame suspicion in his gaze. Their silent exchange was weighted with unspoken truths, his gratitude tempered by caution, her resolve shadowed by the risk. In this fragile truce, time seemed suspended between the past horrors of battle and the uncertain dawn ahead. Night deepened, fragmenting the darkness with flickering candlelight. The warrior's breath grew steadier as the woman whispered stories of the land, tales not of conquest, but of endurance. Through cracked lips, he listened. Through wary eyes, he began to see a fragile hope nestled within this remote sanctuary. But the frontier bore no promises. At sunrise, the fragile peace shattered with the distant thunder of hooves pounding the parched earth. She pressed herself against the wooden frame, heart pounding as she peered through the narrow slit of her window. There they were, a band of Apache warriors, their faces painted for war, silent and resolute as they formed a circle around her homestead. Their presence was a storm unleashed, a question blazing in their dark eyes. Protector or judge? The woman's breath caught in her throat, the weight of the moment crushing yet electrifying. The very act of mercy she had extended now hung poised between salvation and doom. The land held its breath, and so did she, on the knife's edge between hope and peril. Many fellow travelers who follow our forgotten frontier tales have told us the merciless winds of fate, or the treacherous YouTube algorithm sometimes undo their subscriptions without warning. Before the next perilous trail unfolds and new twists arise, glance just below the video and make sure you are still riding with our band to not lose the thread of this story. We don't want you to miss any voice echoing across this valley. Check your subscription now and join our saga. The circle of Apache warriors formed in eerie silence around the homestead, unyielding as the jagged cliffs that loomed overhead. Their faces, etched with streaks of red and black war paint, were unreadable masks of judgment. The woman pressed her back against the rough wooden frame of her cabin, heart hammering, breaths shallow like the fading light that fought the darkening sky. Inside, the wounded warrior stirred beneath a threadbare blanket. His eyes, dim but fierce, caught hers through the thin veil of shadow. A silent plea passed between them, a fragile alliance forged by desperation and a shared defiance of the relentless frontier. A voice, sharp as a knife, broke the tense quiet. "Why harbor a deathbed stranger, woman?" The leader's tone held no warmth, only the cold weight of authority. She kept her gaze steady, voice steady, though her hands trembled. Because even enemies deserve mercy. The words hung in the cold air, as heavy and unyielding as the land itself. The leader's eyes narrowed, the circle tightening like a noose. He carries the mark of our enemies, settlers who spill Apache blood without remorse. His gaze flicked toward the wounded man. Why risk your life for him? She swallowed the sudden lump rising in her throat, recalling the countless nights spent in solitude, where the line between right and wrong blurred beneath the unrelenting sun. I see a man, not a symbol, a soul on the edge of death. There was truth simmering beneath her words, a refusal to surrender humanity. The leader paced, bare feet touching the earth with reverence and wariness. Our people hunt those who betray our lands, he said grimly, and your kind shelters them. This endangers all. Outside, the wind snaked between the stones and grasses as if listening, the last light scraping the sky like a trembling whisper. She dared a cautious glance at the warrior's pale face. Beneath the pain, his eyes now held a flicker of something new. Voice curt. They come, not just a patrol, but more. Men riding hard and fast, guns hungry for flesh and vengeance. We must decide. The woman's grip on the wooden frame tightened until knuckles blanched. If her secret was unearthed now, the brutal hand of frontier justice would fall without mercy. Yet the warriors waited, both judge and jury, searching for a sign. Her survival, their verdict, balanced precariously on a thread of silent understanding and unspoken choices. Minutes bled into eternity. Then she dared to speak, voice a whisper that carried the weight of 1,000 dusty sunsets. Help me protect him, protect what little good remains here. Her eyes sought the leaders, raw and unwavering. For a heartbeat the world stilled, as if the land itself pondered the choice. Then the leader stooped, fingers brushing the warrior's battered cheek. Pain flickered in the wounded man's eyes, but beneath it, a spark of fierce pride rekindled. This land demands loyalty, not blind obedience, but respect. If you shelter him, then so shall we. A murmur rippled through the circle, The young scout's gaze softened, and one by one, the warriors lowered their weapons, uncertainty mingling with the fragile hope that grew like sapling bloodwood after rain. Inside the cabin, the woman crossed to a battered tin pot, her motions hurried but careful. As she set it over the embers, her mind raced. Trust was a rare currency here, one she had gambled with everything she possessed. The wounded warrior stirred again, voice cracking with weariness, but curiosity. "Why?" he rasped. "Why risk yourself?" Her gaze didn't falter. "Because this land has taught me that survival is no longer enough. There is honor left to fight for, even if it costs me all." A flicker of gratitude softened his stern features, yet shadows lingered. The ground outside trembled faintly with the distant thunder of hooves. The woman's breath caught. The leader spoke quietly, eyes cast over the horizon. "The militia rides toward us, vengeance trailing close." His gaze met hers, a storm of turmoil and resolve. "We will stand with you, but this will not end with shelter. There will be a reckoning." Attention the horizon, the militia's relentless charge. Behind her, the warrior tested his strength, rising with a grimace. "If we survive this night, the land will never be the same." His voice was fierce, defiant, but laced with the fragile hope they both clung to. Suddenly, a distant crack rang sharp and sudden, a single gunshot echoing through the valley, cutting through the frail veil of dusk. The woman's world shuddered as the wilderness answered with a howl, not of pain, but of a storm about to break. And in that split second, beneath the bleeding sky, a shadow detached itself from the militia's charge. A figure cloaked in dust, riding toward the homestead, with eyes burning not with fire, before the blow. The woman's fingers curled around the doorframe, knuckles whitening as the weight of each heartbeat pressed into her chest. The wounded warrior's breath was steady, but shallow, nostrils flaring in the scent of impending danger. Outside, the cacophony of hooves pounded like thunder, chasing the wind, relentless, wild, and nearing fast. Her eyes met the leader of the Apache circle, whose dark gaze was sharper than any blade. The unspoken promise hung thick between them. This night would forge their fates with fire. She did not flinch, but clenched her jaw, the years of isolation distilled into a single resolve: protect this man, no matter the cost. Suddenly, the first rider burst from the distant swirl of dust, silhouetted by the fading sun. His horse reared, nostrils flaring, muscles taut like drawn bows. The militia was charging, guns prime, voices raised in fierce battle cries. The frontier air vibrated with the tension of a powder keg ready to explode. "Ready yourself," the leader murmured, voice low but commanding. "We stand not as foes tonight, but as one against the greater storm." Inside, the cabin trembled with the weight of destiny unspooling. The woman moved quickly, fetching rough bandages from a wooden box and fresh water heated to a warm glow. The warrior winced as she tended the wounds again, her touch gentle but urgent. Every second could be the last chance, each moment stretched thin between hope and doom. His eyes pinned hers, questions veiled beneath the haze of pain. "Why risk all for me?" he rasped, voice rasping as raw as the dry air that whipped through the cracks in the walls. She paused, searching his haunted gaze, as memories flickered like ghosts behind her eyes, nights spent alone beneath endless stars, fighting the cold bite of loneliness and fear. "Because," she said finally, voice brittle but clear, "there is still goodness left to defend in this broken land. Mercy is a choice I make, even if it breaks me." A rare flicker of something, gratitude, respect, sparked in his eyes before a shadow crept over their fragile truce. Distant and growing, the unmistakable clang of steel and the harsh bark of orders fired like gunshots into the thickening dusk. The militia's vanguard was closing fast, threatening to rip their fragile alliance apart with chaos and blood. Outside, the Apache warriors quickened their pace, silently readying weapons with practiced ease. The leader stepped to the cabin door, hand resting briefly on the rough wood, as if drawing strength from the land itself. They come, with fire in their eyes and death in their hearts. We fight for more than survival tonight. The woman swallowed hard, tension coiling in her stomach like a rattlesnake ready to strike. "What will we do? If they find him, they will kill without mercy," the leader interrupted, voice grim as the cliff's shadow above. "But we choose if it ends that way." A tense silence fell, broken only by the rhythm of horse hooves hammering closer, and the woman heard it. A familiar whistle sung by the wind through the canyon, carrying a message older than words. The warrior stirred again, tense but flickering with the smallest pulse of renewed strength. Suddenly, a rustle at the edge of the clearing caught their attention. Quick footsteps brushing dry grass, too softly for the militia's horses. A figure slipped from shadow to shadow, swift and silent, carrying a folded parchment. The leader's eyes narrowed, muscles coiling beneath painted skin. "News," he breathed. "But what news rides this close to death's door?" The figure emerged fully, a young Apache messenger, breathless but steady. Her eyes locked with the leader's, heavy with urgency. They are not alone. Reinforcements ride behind the militia. More men, with rifles and cold orders to burn till none remain. The woman's breath froze, chest tightening as the walls seemed to close in from all sides. "We won't last the night like this." The warrior pushed himself upright beside her, voice raw but fierce. "Then we must change the game. No longer hidden, no longer hunted like shadows. This land will witness fire and blood if we survive. But there must be a choice beyond death." His words hung like smoke in the confined space, igniting a spark of defiance. The leader nodded slowly, stepping back to rally his warriors. "Then we ride as one, not broken tribes or scattered souls, but a force reborn." The woman's eyes scanned their ragged circle, each face a map of scars and stories, fears and fierce honor. She touched the warrior's arm, feeling the tremor beneath the thin skin. "If we make it through, what then?" He met her gaze, fierce and clear. "Then the valley will never forget the night Mercy stood against the storm." The first gunshot tore through the gathering dark, a brutal punctuation mark that shattered the fragile calm. Horses reared and voices rose, fierce cries spilling like wildfire into the night air. The woman drew a deep breath, heart pounding a wild rhythm against her ribs. She stepped forward, meeting the leader's steady eyes. Whatever comes, we face it together. The distant thunder of hooves brought the militia crashing in. But nothing moved beneath the surface. No shadow shifted. In that breathless moment, the woman caught sight of a lone figure galloping faster than the rest, dust trailing like a cloak. Clad in worn leather and a battered hat pulled low, the rider's eyes blazed not with fury, but with something far colder, a secret carved into bone and blood. As the storm unleashed itself fully, the figure drew closer, carrying with him a warning that would shatter any hope of peace and ignite the fragile valley into flames anew. And as he crossed the threshold of the homestead, the night fractured, not under thunder, but under the pointed glint of a leveled rifle aimed directly at the wounded Apache's heart. The rifle's cold gleam caught the last blaze of sunset. As the rider broke from the militia's charge, a shadow carved sharp against the blood-red sky. Each hoofbeat hammered in rhythm with the woman's thudding pulse, her breath caught, heart-wrenching, with the knowledge that no mercy awaited on the horizon. The figure slowed just long enough to raise his rifle with unflinching resolve. Time folded inward, an excruciating heartbeat stretched thin between life and the final act. The woman's hand trembled toward the warrior's shoulder, willing him to survive this cruel reckoning. But before the shot could fire, a sudden primal scream ruptured the suffocating stillness. From the circle of Apache warriors, a young scout leapt forward, a war cry tearing through the tension like lightning. Chaos erupted, horse hooves rearing, weapons clashing, shattering the fragile calm they had fought to forge. The leader's bark cut through the din. Down, protect the wounded. His voice, grim and commanding, rallied the warriors into motion. The woman shoved the cabin door open and dragged the warrior behind the weathered frame, the world outside erupting into a storm of gunfire and fury. The bullets sang past, sinking into the aged wood inches from the wounded man's side. His labored breath hitched, but fierce determination glimmered in his eyes. Despite pain and exhaustion, he grasped her hand, a silent vow binding them amid the blood-soaked chaos. Gunfire echoed like thunder rolling over the valley, shells chipping stone and splintering timber. Yet beneath the fury, a strange symphony took shape, the clatter of weapons interlaced with shouts, cries, and the steady thrum of hooves pounding unforgiving earth. Every ragged breath sworn in this fight was a testament to endurance, defiance against fate's cruel hand. The woman crouched, heart pounding, as the militia's forms swept past the homestead. But the Apache warriors did not falter. They surged forward, blades flashing and rifles raised, the fury of a people defending more than land. They fought for honor, survival, and the fragile mosaic of trust born in fire and blood. In a breath-stealing moment, the wounded warrior pulled himself loosely upright, his weight leaning on the woman's steady frame. "Hold fast," he rasped, voice cracked but fierce. Tonight, no retreat. The defiance in his words sparked a fire that ignited the weary souls surrounding them. The leader circled back, face dark under the bruised sky, eyes alight with war and something softer, a promise wrought from hardship. "We stand as one," he declared, voice a low thunder that shook the dust beneath their boots. "The valley will remember this night. Mercy and steel, bound by blood." But even as these words settled, a sudden crack shattered the night. From the ridge behind the militia, a burst of rifle fire cut through the returning roar, a volley precise and deadly. The militia buckled, some falling, chaos fracturing their ranks. A shadow detached itself from the dim line, a mounted rider with a scarred face and sharp eyes, relentless and calculating. The woman's gaze met the Apache leaders, an unspoken warning passing between them. This was no ordinary battle. Darker threads had tangled the night's fate. The man on horseback was no mere soldier, but a harbinger of a threat far bloodier and more cunning than they had faced. Desperation and resolve blended in the woman's veins. She tightened her grip on the warrior's hand, feeling his pulse, a fragile drumbeat of life defying death. "We cannot let this valley fall to ruin," she whispered, voice trembling but unbroken, "no matter what storms come." As the firefight roared and horses stampeded, the young scout circled back, eyes wild. "More men are coming, outsiders with orders to burn all who shelter the Apache." Her voice broke with urgency. "They ride with fire and no mercy. Our time is short." The wounded warrior's lips pressed into a grim line. "Then we must strike before darkness swallows us whole." His hand brushed the woman's cheek, fevered but tender. "This night will mark the turning of the land itself." A hush fell for an instant, the valley holding its breath between the screams and gunfire. Each face around her, a map etched deep with loss, hope, and unyielding strength. She saw in their eyes the iron will to reshape a broken world where mercy was a battlefield and survival came at the cost of the soul. From the rising smoke came a chilling truth. This was no mere fight for territory. It was the dawn of a reckoning where old scars would reopen, alliances would shatter, and the fragile thread of peace would snap under the weight of hatred and secrets long buried. The woman straightened, voice clear despite the chaos. "We fight not just for survival, but for every soul that dreams of a dawn after the storm." Her gaze locked on the leader, steady as the canyon cliffs. "Tonight, this land remembers who we are." Above, the first stars blinked cold witness to the bloodshed below. The militia regrouped, voices calling for ruthless final blows. But the Apache line held firm, a wall of fire and spirit, forged in desperation. Suddenly, from deep shadows near the timberline, the scarred rider reemerged, sliding from his mount with the ease of a predator stalking fresh kill. His eyes were dark embers beneath a face weathered by violence. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his rifle again, aiming not at soldiers, but directly at the wounded warrior cradled carefully by the woman. A terrible silence swallowed the gunfire for a breathless second. The shot that would write the next chapter in this valley's tortured history was poised, an echo of death waiting to shatter fragile hope. And then, as the trigger twitched, a sharp crack soared through the night, but not from the scarred rider's rifle. From the darkness beyond, a second shot rang out, clean, unstoppable. The scarred man's body jerked, eyes wide with shock and betrayal, as he stumbled backward, a red bloom spreading across his chest. The woman gasped, breath frozen. The circle tightened, both warriors and settlers alike frozen in disbelief. The valley, drenched in smoke and fear, seemed to hold its breath for a moment longer. From the shadows stepped a new figure, cloaked and unseen until now. His voice cut through the cacophony, calm and deadly. This land demands justice, but justice has many faces. His gaze swept over the huddled group, settling with chilling intent on the wounded Apache. The woman's heart slammed fiercely against her ribs as realization dawned. Allies and enemies alike had just crossed an invisible threshold. The fragile truce was crumbling, and a darker game was beginning. Before she could ask who this new player was, the wind carried a distant but unmistakable sound. War horns echoing across the valley, rallying cries carried on cold air that tasted of coming blood. The night's shadows deepened, the river of fate fast-flowing and treacherous. The woman tightened her grip on the warrior's hand and whispered, "Hold fast. The dawn may bring more than just light." The valley trembled under the weight of those words, the promise of a war that would not spare the innocent or the guilty. And as the first embers of battle faded into night, the stage was set for a reckoning that would burn forever in the history of these forsaken lands. The shot rang out, a brutal crack that split the twilight like a thunderclap and shattered the fragile cover of the homestead. The woman's breath caught, a silent scream frozen on her lips as the scarred rider's rifle jerked uselessly. The bullet lost to the night. The deadly volley came from shadows beyond, a precise shot that sent the would-be assassin staggering backward, blood blooming on his chest in a dark, spreading stain. The sudden salvo threw the militia into disarray. Shouts erupted, horses reared and galloped in wild circles, while the Apache warriors seized their moment, surging forward with blade and rifle. The valley seemed to tremble under the weight of their fury, a tempest born of desperation and ancient grief. The wounded Apache warrior pressed closer to the woman, his fingers tight around her wrist like a lifeline. "We must move," he rasped, the pain etched in every syllable, yet his fierce, haunted eyes held an unyielding fire. "They will not relent. We cannot stay." Outside, the militia struggled to regain control, their ranks fractured by surprise and the sudden loss of their comrade. The air filled with the acrid sting of gunpowder and the sharp cries of combatants, caught between fear and fury. But it was no longer a simple clash of settlers and Apache. It was a collision of the past and the present, a reckoning where alliances and enmities blurred beneath the bloodied sky. The leader of the Apache warriors stepped between the woman and the chaos beyond, his gaze hard but steady. "The valley is no longer quiet," he said, voice low like a drumbeat. "Our enemies come not just with guns, to burn, to kill, to erase. We face a force forged in hatred, deeper than any of us have known." Her heart thundered in her chest, every instinct screaming for flight or fight. Yet she locked eyes with the warrior she had saved, the man whose hollowed strength had become a beacon in the darkness. "Then what do we do?" she whispered, voice trembling with the weight of impossible choices. He met her gaze without hesitation. "We become the storm they fear. We don't just survive, we fight for the land, for the memories burned in its soil, for the hope that still flickers in this valley." A sudden shift moved through the circle of warriors, something older than fear, older than pain. It was defiance, raw and palpable. The woman felt it pulse like a living thing, binding them all in a fragile covenant, woven through blood and resolve. Amid the roaring clamor, the young Apache scout who had borne the grim news slipped forward, breathless. "More riders ride fast behind the militia," she warned, eyes wide with urgency. "Men sent to burn all who dare shelter our people. They bring no mercy. Fire and death follow their path." The leader's face darkened, shadows fallen deep across his war-painted cheeks. "This is no longer a fight for refuge," he said grimly. "It is war, an unforgiving war for every inch of this land and the soul it carries." The woman glanced toward the broken horizon. Dust clouds churned, spurred by countless hooves, swallowing the last scars of light. Among them, she caught fleeting glimpses of riders armed not just with rifles, but with grim purpose and cruelty that chilled her to the bone. She reached out, steadying the warrior who leaned heavily against her side. "We have no choice," she murmured, voice steady, despite the tempest thrashing within her. "If we fall now, this land will drown in blood and silence." A faint, bitter smile touched his cracked lips. "Then let us carve a new path, with fire and courage," he replied. "One that the valley will remember, long after the war cries fade to dust." The circle tightened, the warriors pulling their weapons close, eyes flashing with steel and resolve. The woman's gaze flicked to the cabin door, half open now, the night air creeping inside with the scent of smoke and gunfire. Behind that thin barrier lay sanctuary and fragility, hope woven from the threads of mercy and survival. Suddenly, the shadows beyond stirred again. A figure emerged from the darkness, slow and deliberate in his approach. Cloaked in a dust-streaked coat, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, he moved with a predator's grace. His eyes, sharp and merciless, fixed unblinkingly on the wounded warrior cradled in her arms. The valley held its breath as the man reached into his coat, fingers closing around cold steel. Time slowed. The woman's heart seized, every nerve screaming warning. And then light flashed, not from his hand, but from behind him. Another figure, long concealed by smoke and night, stepped forward with a rifle raised, steady and true. The newcomer's voice broke the hush, calm and dark. "Justice wears many faces," he said, eyes sweeping the war-weary circle. "But tonight, mercy fights its fiercest battle yet." The scarred rider's weapon clattered to the ground as he crumpled, a red bloom blossoming across his chest. The silence that followed was sharp, breaking against the crashing tide of reinforcements bearing down upon them from the ridge. The woman's breath hitched, hope and dread warring within her. She tightened her grip on the warrior's hand, feeling the faint pulse, a fragile promise amid the encroaching storm. Above, the first stars blinked cold witness to this fragile alliance, now steeped in blood and fire. The distant sound of war horns echoed off the cliffs, a grim herald of the battles yet to come. Her voice dropped to a whisper, fierce with resolve. Hold fast. Tonight, this valley learns that mercy is the greatest weapon of all. The ground thundered beneath the charge, shadows deepened, and the night fractured under the weight of swords, bullets, and unyielding hearts. But amid the chaos, a single truth crystallized. The fight for this land was far from over. And as the clash unfolded, the woman glimpsed in the eyes of the wounded Apache a silent vow that echoed in her very soul. If we fall here, the valley will burn. But if we rise, nothing will ever be the same again. Then, from the twisted shadows near the homesteads, a sudden spark of flame ignited, bright, deliberate, and deadly, racing toward the cabin walls. In that terror-seized moment, the woman's scream was swallowed by the roar of fire. The frontier's merciless heart had opened wide once more, and the dawn now inhaled a testament to a will refusing to surrender. Then, sharp and sudden, a crack in the air. The rider raised his weapon and took aim. Time stretched thin, the seconds folding inward with deadly intent. Her hand reached forward, trembling, to steady the warrior's shoulder, willing the moment to hold, to change. A wild, fierce war cry tore through the thick tension, splitting the stifling silence like lightning. From the circle of Apache warriors, the scout leapt forward, the raw power of her voice shattering the fragile truce forged on mercy alone. Chaos exploded, hooves reared, rifles cracked, and battle erupted with the force of a tempest unleashed. Down, the leader bellowed, voice like rolling thunder, commanding the storm of warriors. The woman yanked the warrior behind the cracked wooden frame, just as the bullet sang past, biting into the weathered wood inches from his side. His chest rose and fell with a stubborn defiance that kindled a fierce spark in his eyes. Bullets ricocheted, splinters flew, and the night erupted into a cacophony of war. Echoes of vengeance mingled with cries for survival, steel clashing with anarchy. Yet beneath the fury, an unshakable rhythm persisted, the measured pulse of resolve, the heartbeat of a people standing unyielding. The woman tethered her breath to his, her pulse thrumming in tandem with the thunder of hooves. "Hold fast," he rasped, voice rough but unwavering. "Tonight we fight as one." The leader circled them, face darkened beneath smeared war paint, eyes blazing. "This fight is more than blood spilled. It's the reckoning our ancestors whispered of. Justice, not blind obedience." Outside, the militia faltered, their confidence cracked by the unexpected volley. A scarred rider detached from their ranks, eyes cold and calculating, rising from his mount like a shadow cast by death itself. His gaze was a blade, sharp and merciless, fixed on the wounded man. The woman met the leader's gaze, a silent warning passing between them. This was no mere skirmish. Darker threads wove through the night's violence. The scarred figure was the embodiment of a threat born not just of frontier hatred, but calculated cruelty. The wounded warrior's fingers grazed her cheek, fevered but tender. "If we survive this night," he murmured, "the valley will never be the same." The leader nodded, rallying his warriors with a furious cry. "We will ride as one, the fury of the land, the echo of our ancestors. We make this night our crucible." A hush fell like a shroud just before the war exploded again. From the shadowed timberline, a rifle's crack split the air. A shot, precise as a serpent's strike. The militia faltered, men falling as chaos fractured their lines. The woman sensed the weight of the unknown pressing in. More than soldiers marched against them. An unspoken malevolence had joined the fray. The young scout returned, breathless, eyes wild. "More ride beyond," she warned. "Men sent to burn every refuge, to leave ashes for our people." Darkness swirled in the leader's eyes. "This is no refuge now," he said grimly. "It is a war that will consume the land and all who tread it." The dust clouds burgeoned on the horizon, their swelling toll a violent drumbeat nearing fast. The woman steadied the warrior against her, voice low, unbreakable. "If we fall, this valley will drown in silence." The warrior's lips quirked in a grim smile. "Then let us carve new memory, one of fire, courage, and defiance." Weapons drawn, eyes ablaze with desperate honor, they steeled themselves. The door creaked open as night's chill crept inside. Behind it lay fragile hope and the cold, bitter edge of survival. Then the silhouette emerged from darkness, coat heavy with dust, hat cast low, moving with the grace of a predator stalking prey. His eyes, hard and unyielding, fixed unblinking on the wounded man who leaned against the woman. Time froze. The man's hand slipped to the rifle. Her heart seized in terror, every nerve screaming warning. Then light flashed, not from the predator's hand, but from shadows behind. A second figure stepped forward, rifle raised steady. Calm, deadly. Justice wears many faces. The new voice cut through the chaos, piercing the night. His eyes swept over the huddle of warriors and settlers alike. Tonight, mercy fights its fiercest battle. The scarred rider's weapon hit the dirt as he crumpled, a dark stain blossoming across his chest. Silence swallowed the gunfire for a breathless moment, broken only by the pounding of countless hooves rallying at the ridge. The woman's breath caught, hope tangled with dread. Her fingers gripped the warriors, pulse faint but stubborn. Above, the first cold stars blinked witness to the fragile alliance now baptized in blood and fire. The distant war horns echoed with grim intent. She leaned close, voice a sharp promise. "Hold fast. Dawn comes carrying more than light." A seismic rumble shook the earth beneath the charge. Shadows deepened. The night fractured beneath the blades, bullets, and iron will of those bound by blood and desperation. Amid the chaos, the woman glimpsed a silent vow in the warrior's eyes, a vow echoing in her own soul. "If we fall here, the valley will burn, but if we rise, nothing will ever be the same again." And then, From the tangled shadows edging the homestead, a sudden flickering flame sprinted, a bright, deliberate spark racing toward the cabin walls. Her scream caught in her throat, swallowed by the roar of fire. The merciless heart of the frontier had opened wide once more. And at the breaking dawn, the valley waited, heavy with ruin and reckoning. The rifle's cold glint caught the fading light as the rider surged forward from the militia's charge, the homestead's fragile sanctuary facing a storm about to break. The woman's fingers clenched the doorframe, knuckles white beneath the prickling heat of fear. The wounded Apache's breath was steady but ragged, each inhale a testament to a will refusing to surrender. Then, sharp and sudden, a crack in the air, the rider raised his weapon and took aim. Time stretched thin, the seconds folding inward with deadly intent. Her hand reached forward, trembling, to steady the warrior's shoulder, willing the moment to hold, to change. A wild, fierce war cry tore through the thick tension, splitting the suffocating silence like lightning. From the circle of Apache warriors, the scout leapt forward, the raw power of her voice shattering the fragile truce forged on mercy alone. Chaos exploded, hooves reared, rifles cracked, and battle erupted with the force of a tempest unleashed. "Down!" the leader bellowed, voice like rolling thunder, commanding the storm of warriors. The woman yanked the warrior behind the cracked wooden frame, just as the bullet sang past, biting into the weathered wood inches from his side. His chest rose and fell with a stubborn defiance that kindled a fierce spark in his eyes. Bullets ricocheted, splinters flew, and the night erupted into a cacophony of war. Echoes of vengeance mingled with cries for survival, steel clashing with anarchy, yet beneath the fury, an unshakable rhythm persisted, the measured pulse of resolve, the heartbeat of a people standing unyielding. The woman tethered her breath to his, her pulse thrumming in tandem with the thunder of hooves. "Hold fast," he rasped, voice rough but unwavering. "Tonight we fight as one." The leader circled them, face darkened beneath smeared war paint, eyes blazing. "This fight is more than blood spilled. It's the reckoning our ancestors whispered of. Justice, not blind obedience." Outside, the militia faltered, their confidence cracked by the unexpected volley. A scarred rider, detached from their ranks, eyes cold and calculating, rising from his mount like a shadow cast by death itself. His gaze was a blade, sharp and merciless, fixed on the wounded man. The woman met the leader's gaze, a silent warning passing between them. This was no mere skirmish. Darker threads wove through the night's violence. The scarred figure was the embodiment of a threat, born not just of frontier hatred, but calculated cruelty. The wounded warrior's fingers grazed her cheek, fevered but tender. "If we survive this night," he murmured, "the valley will never be the same." The leader nodded, rallying his warriors with a furious cry. "We will ride as one, the fury of the land, the echo of our ancestors. We make this night our crucible." A hush fell like a shroud just before the war exploded again. From the shadowed timberline, a rifle's crack split the air, a shot precise as a serpent's strike. The militia faltered, men falling as chaos fractured their lines. The woman sensed the weight of the unknown pressing in. More than soldiers marched against them. An unspoken malevolence had joined the fray. The young scout returned, breathless, eyes wild. "More ride beyond," she warned. "Men sent to burn every refuge, to leave ashes for our people." Darkness swirled in the leader's eyes. "This is no refuge now," he said grimly. "It is a war that will consume the land and all who tread it." The dust clouds burgeoned on the horizon, their swelling toll a violent drumbeat nearing fast. The woman steadied the warrior against her, voice low, unbreakable. "If we fall, this valley will drown in silence." The warrior's lips quirked in a grim smile. "Then let us carve new memory, one of fire, courage, and defiance." Weapons drawn, eyes ablaze with desperate honor, they steeled themselves. The door creaked open as night's chill crept inside. Behind it lay fragile hope and the cold, bitter edge of survival. Then the silhouette emerged from darkness, coat heavy with dust, hat cast low, moving with the grace of a predator stalking prey. His eyes, hard and unyielding, fixed unblinking on the wounded man, who leaned against the woman. Time froze. The man's hand slipped to the rifle. Her heart seized in terror, every nerve screaming warning. Then, light flashed, not from the predator's hand, but from shadows behind. A second figure stepped forward, rifle raised steady. Calm, deadly. "Justice wears many faces." The new voice cut through the chaos, piercing the night. His eyes swept over the huddle of warriors and settlers alike. Tonight, mercy fights its fiercest battle. The scarred rider's weapon hit the dirt as he crumpled, a dark stain blossoming across his chest. Silence swallowed the gunfire for a breathless moment, broken only by the pounding of countless hooves rallying at the ridge. The woman's breath caught, hope tangled with dread. Her fingers gripped the warrior's, pulse faint but stubborn. Above, the first cold stars blinked witness to the fragile alliance now baptized in blood and fire. The distant war horns echoed with grim intent. She leaned close, voice a sharp promise. "Hold fast, dawn comes carrying more than light." A seismic rumble shook the earth beneath the charge. Shadows deepened, the night fractured beneath the blades, bullets, and iron will of those bound by blood and desperation. Amid the chaos, the woman glimpsed a silent vow in the warrior's eyes, a vow echoing in her own soul. "If we fall here, the valley will burn. But if we rise, nothing will ever be the same again." And then, from the tangled shadows edging the homestead, a sudden, flickering flame sprinted, a bright, deliberate spark racing toward the cabin walls. Her scream caught in her throat, swallowed by the roar of fire. The flames licked hungrily at the wooden walls, their orange tongues reaching higher with each passing second. The woman's lungs burned as she inhaled thick smoke, choking off hope with every breath. Outside, the militia shouts turned frantic, a desperate chorus swallowed by the crackling inferno. The homestead, once a fragile haven carved from the endless prairie, now flickered on the edge of annihilation. The wounded Apache grasped her hand tightly. His grip, a fragile anchor amid the chaos. His dark eyes, wild with pain, yet sharp with determination, met hers as embers danced between them. "We have no time," he rasped, voice ragged but resolute. "This fire will consume what little refuge we have left. We must move, now." Her fingers trembled as she helped him to his feet, leaning into the weight he still bore, despite the agony etched in every muscle. The dust and ash swirled around them, ghostly figures dancing in the orange haze. Every step toward the door was a battle against the suffocating heat and the crushing weight of fear. Outside, the Apache warriors formed a protective ring, faces smeared with soot and defiance. Their war paints now blurred by sweat and smoke. They stood resolute against the encroaching militia, who faltered under the unexpected ferocity of their resistance. Hooves beat the parched earth, while rifles roared in a grim symphony. Each shot a desperate plea for survival. The woman steadied herself against the doorframe, heart pounding as she scanned the horizon. The rising smoke mocked the fading sunlight, a cruel reminder that time was slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. "Where will we go?" she whispered, fear and resolve mingling in her voice. "There is nothing but open land, and those men chase us like shadows, hungry for blood." The Apache leader stepped forward, blade gleaming dully beneath the ashen sky. His voice was low, carrying centuries of grief and fury. "The valley itself hides secrets not even the militia knows. We will find shelter there, but the night grows darker, and our enemies will not rest." She looked back at the wounded man, once a prisoner of fate, now a beacon in this ragged band of souls. His lip curled into a faint, grim smile. "If this night ends with fire and death, let it be known that mercy fought alongside steel." Suddenly, a muffled cry tore through the smoke, a child's frightened sob that sliced through the tension like a knife. The woman's heart, older than 10, his clothes torn and stained, his dark eyes wide with terror, locked on to the circle of warriors with a silent plea. The woman's knees weakened, yet she knelt, extending her arms. He hesitated, then collapsed into her embrace, shivering. "Where did you come from?" she asked softly, voice trembling. The boy's reply was a hoarse whisper, riddled with fear and grief. "The fire, they left me." His gaze darted toward the advancing militia, and panic flickered across his face. "They burn everything." The leader's voice cut through the air. "We are not alone in this fight. Our enemies seek to scorch the earth and bury the valley in ashes. But we will stand, not as scattered survivors, but as one." The militia regrouped, reinvigorated by cruel orders, pressing the attack with brutal precision. Yet the Apache warriors did not waver. Their unity, forged in desperation and blood, now blazed brighter than any conflagration. The woman wrapped the boy closer, feeling the fragile pulse of hope amid ruin. In the distance, the trail of dust marked the relentless approach of more riders, new horrors baying for vengeance. As the first stars pierced the murky veil of night, the woman's gaze hardened like obsidian. We cannot outrun what hunts us. The wounded Apache's voice was a ragged vow. Then we fight, not just for survival, but to carve a future where mercy is not a whispered old tale, but a legacy sown in the soil of this valley. A sudden movement caught her eye, a shadow slipping through the smoke near the cliff's edge. The silhouette was familiar, the scarred rider, his face a mask of cold fury and unyielding purpose. His gaze sliced through the darkness, settling on their broken circle with lethal intent. Before she could cry a warning, the rider stepped forward, rifle leveled. A silent executioner, poised to snuff out the fragile flame of hope they had built. But then, a flash of steel. Another figure materialized, a stranger with calm eyes and a steady hand, interposing himself in the deadly line. His voice cut through the chaos, a whisper threaded with power and peril. This night is far from over. Justice wears many faces, some cloaked in shadow. The scarred man staggered, a crimson blossom unfurling across his chest. The militia's momentum faltered again, uncertainty flickering like candlelight threatened by a storm. The woman's breath caught, heart thundering wildly. She gripped the wounded warrior's arm, feeling the faint pulse that refused to yield. "Hold fast," she whispered, "for the dawn will come on the wings of those who refuse to surrender." The leader's voice soared. Above the din, a roar that echoed through the valley. "Stand firm. Tonight we write the story of this land, not with ashes, but with the blood of the just." As the clamor of war swelled and the smoke thickened, the woman cast one last glance toward the cabin, now whispered away in flame. Her sanctuary lost, but her spirit unbroken. And beneath the gathering storm, a chilling truth lingered. The battle for the valley was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming their very souls. Then, through the crackling frenzy, a sudden and sinister crackle hissed from the dark. The unmistakable spark of a new fire, racing swiftly from the far edge of the homestead, threatening to explode anew. The woman's scream was swallowed as the frontier's merciless heart opened once more, ushering in a night that would forever stain the valley's soul. The fire crackled and spit, swallowing the last fragile refuge whole. Smoke billowed thick and choking, twisting in ghostly ribbons beneath a sky fast wilting to darkness. The woman stood firm amidst the chaos, her breath shallow but steady, hands still gripping the wounded Apache warrior's arm, as if anchoring them both to this moment. A fragile tether against a world unraveling in flames and fury. Outside, the militia faltered under the fierce resistance of the Apache circle, their unity forged in desperation and raw resolve. Though broken, they refused to yield. The scarred rider lay fallen, justice dealt by an unseen hand that protected this battered alliance. A sign that mercy could wield steel as fiercely as the fiercest blade. The woman's eyes met the dark gaze of the Apache leader beside her, whose voice now bore the weight of command and a fierce promise. "This night reshaped our fates," he said quietly. "Blood was spilled, but so was hope, a hope we hold fast." The warrior's grip on her hand tightened, strength flickering through battered limbs. "The valley will remember, not the flames that sought to consume us, but the courage that refused to fade." As the smoke thinned and reality crept back through the haze, they moved swiftly, gathering scattered survivors, including a small boy saved from the ashes, whose frightened eyes now gazed up with the first fragile spark of trust. She cradled him close, a living symbol of all that still needed protecting. Together, they slipped quietly into the shadowed cleft of the valley, a long-hidden sanctuary whispered of in old legends, shielded by rugged stone and encircling pines. The land itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as they crossed into its embrace, a quiet refuge for souls worn thin by loss. There, beneath a canopy of stars finally piercing the dark, the wounded warrior was tended with reverence. His breaths grew calmer, resilience brandished like a quiet flame. The woman knelt, her hands steady as she traced the line of scars and wounds, seeing not just suffering, but survival, defiance etched deep in flesh and spirit alike. The Apache leader stood watchful, offering quiet words of respect and promise. Our people fight not just for place, but for the right to be seen, to be remembered beyond legends and blood. Silence settled over the group, a heavy peace that bore the weight of countless battles fought and endured. The woman exhaled slowly, feeling the valley's heartbeat steady beneath her fingertips, a pulse tied to the promise of dawn. In the days that followed, as the militia's reach waned and word of the night's turmoil spread, a fragile truce emerged. The settlers, scarred by loss and humbled by unity, found cautious kinship with the Apache warriors who had fought beside them, bound not by history's wounds, but by the shared resolve to safeguard this land and one another. The woman, once solitary and wary, became a bridge between worlds, her homestead a beacon where histories intertwined and old hostilities gave way to understanding and respect. The wounded warrior, healed through time and care, stood tall again, his presence a testament to mercy's enduring strength. As spring unfurled its tender green across the valley, the boy who had once trembled beneath smoke and shadow learned to laugh amid wildflowers, embraced by a community forged anew in fire and blood. Stories of that fierce night became legend, not of ruin, but of courage standing firm against the merciless winds. Under the endless sky, the woman and the warrior stood side by side at the crest of a gentle hill, gazing out over the valley that had tested them. The scars they bore, both visible and unseen, were reminders of the cost, but also of the bonds forged among ashes. The dawn's first light bathed them in gold, swallowing shadows of the past. The warrior's voice, soft but steady, broke the quiet. This land once abandoned us to pain and fear. Now it carries the promise of a new beginning. She nodded, heart full, eyes shimmering with unshed tears and newfound hope. We fought not just for survival, but for the chance to heal, for mercy to become our legacy. Together, they faced the rising sun, two souls bound by the frontier's harsh embrace, renewed by sacrifice and the unyielding spirit to protect a fragile peace. Behind them lay the smoldering echoes of a hard-fought battle. Before them, the possibility of an enduring dawn. The valley, scarred but unbroken, whispered its ancient song of resilience. In that breathless moment, the woman realized the frontier's merciless heart had opened, but from its depths they had carved a sanctuary forged not by fire alone, but by courage and unshakable humanity. The story of their alliance and sacrifice would echo through generations, a solemn reminder that even in the wasteland, mercy could bloom eternal. And so, beneath the wide prairie sky, the chapter closed, not with silence, but with the steady heartbeat of a land and people renewed, promising that no darkness, no matter how fierce, could ever extinguish the dawn they had fought to grasp.